In this lesson, we're going to learn about detail and sharpening and noise reduction. So in Lightroom, I'm opening up this image at night, which is a good option so that we can see the low light performance of this camera. And that's usually when you would have to do a little bit of noise reduction. So I close the color tab and bring open our detail panel. Okay, so let's scroll down. Now it gives you sort of a preview area. If you want to move that, you can kind of move that around by clicking that little box in the top left and choosing a spot that you want to look at. I think somewhere like in the sky is pretty good. Or you can just hover over the image and click to zoom in and then drag around by moving. You can also press the space bar to zoom in or out. And you can see, well, I don't know if you can see that well, but on my screen, I can see lots of digital noise in the sky. It's made up of all these little pixels, and you can almost kind of see them here. It looks like little bits of sand. Lightroom automatically applies some sharpening to an image when you are editing a raw image. And that's good because when you're shooting a raw image, it actually needs to be processed a little bit to have the right amount of sharpening. And that's why this is set to 25, 1, 25. These numbers right here under sharpening. If you want to make it sharper, you can increase the amount. But let's go actually skip that and look at noise reduction first for this image. So if we want to get rid of some of that digital noise, drag up the luminance noise reduction. And you can see as I do that, everything gets a little bit softer and you start to not see as much of that grain. If I go crazy with it, it gets rid of most of it, but things start to become not so sharp. It almost looks like when you're zoomed in, something's painted with like watercolor. It's not sharp at all. So you don't want to go too crazy. And then you can make adjustments to the style of noise reduction with this detail and contrast. And basically this is Lightroom looking at the edges of things, trying to preserve some of the detail, or if it's okay to get rid of some of the detail to increase the noise reduction. And then the contrast, it's looking at the edges of things. It's really hard to see in this image, but if we drag up here, you might be able to see. If I decrease the contrast all the way, then increase the contrast, it brings back some of that detail. It makes the contrast between two colors, between the edges of things, a little bit more sharp, which actually increases sort of the noise in the image. That's with the luminance noise, and that's the black and white non-saturated noise you get from an underexposed image. You also might have color noise, and if I drag this all the way to the left, you might be able to see a little bit. You see all this little splotches of reds and blues and greens. And so automatically it's getting rid of some of that because this is set to 25. If we want to get rid of even more of that, you can increase it. But in this image, I don't see too much of that color noise at all with the luminance up like this. So I don't have to worry about that. But if you do see a lot of that sort of splotchiness, the reds and yellows and blues, this is the slider that would help you get rid of it. All right, so that's noise reduction, and depending on the image, you might want to add a little bit of that. It also just depends on your settings. If you shot at a higher ISO, you're going to get more digital noise that you might need to apply more noise reduction to. And that brings up a cool trick is that you can actually see the different information either by going to your library and going to the metadata. And here you can see, if we scroll down, you can see the exposure time, you can see the ISO, the camera model, but you can also have a little overlay by going up to View Options, which is Command J on a Mac, Control J on a PC. Click Show Info Overlay, and you can adjust what you see. Click this top one, and I'm going to use just common photo settings. And this is going to show your shutter speed, your ISO, and your f-stop. For some reason, the Sony wasn't giving me that information. It might have been the lens that Sam was using. Let's see if we go to this next photo. Yeah, there we go. We have the shutter speed, the f-stop, the ISO, and then the lens, which is cool information to have. So here you can see that we did have somewhat of a higher ISO. You get a little bit of noise and grain. And so doing a little bit of noise reduction can be good for portraits, and it's okay to get a little bit softer on some portraits as well. losing some of that detail is perfectly fine with me. What about sharpening? Sharpening basically does what it sounds like. It makes photos sharper. Let's go back to this photo. Let's reset it by clicking the reset button down here, which gets rid of all of our adjustments from before. And let's zoom in. If we increase our sharpening, it actually adds digital noise to make things appear sharper. By adding grain, it makes the edges of things look a little bit more contrasty and sharp. You can adjust the amount of sharpening and how it's applied with the radius and detail. Increasing the radius increases sort of the size that is affected, and then the detail also adjusts it as well, making it more contrasty or less contrasty, making you see more detail or less detail. Okay? For landscapes, I would recommend increasing the sharpening just a little bit. I'm going to drop that down again. And for nature shots and things like that, you might want to apply a little bit of sharpening as well. Sharpening is not going to make an out of focus photo in focus, but if something's slightly out of focus, very slightly, it might make it look a little bit better. Especially for group photos of people, if they're farther away and the focus is just slightly off, it can help quite a bit. Cool, so that's the detail panel. That's your sharpening and your noise reduction. In the next lessons, we're going to look at some of the more advanced features in terms of these basic edits, like your effects, which include vignetting, adding grain, and dehazing.